Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I'm here to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of March. This is going to be a very strange wrap-up for me. If you have been watching my channel for any duration of time, you know that I'm pretty stingy with my 5-star reviews. In fact, it's kind of rare that a month gets a 5-star book. I tend to give out a lot of 4s, and every now and then a 5, and I have 4 books this month that I gave 5 stars, which is basically unheard of for me and for my channel. So, setting a record with my channel and my wrap-up here. For some of my reading stats, in the month of March, I read a total of 9 books. One of those was a graphic novel. And of those 9 books, 2 of them were rereads, but the rest of them were all new to me, including that graphic novel. It was new to me as well. So, yeah, this is gonna be a weird wrap-up for me, but let's just jump into it because I have lots of physical books to cover, but I also read a ton of ebooks and ARCs and stuff, so yeah, let's get into it. So the first book that I read in the month of March was The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This was an e-ARC that was provided to me by HarperCollins, and it is going to be released next week on April 11th. I feel like a lot of people are excited for this book. It was on a lot of the most anticipated releases of the year lists, and for good reason. Guys, put your worries to rest. This was fabulous. So this book follows this girl. Her name's Molly Peskinsuso, and she has had 27 crushes but never had an actual boyfriend. Her sister Cassie has never really pushed this, and then Cassie gets a girlfriend, and all of a sudden she's all lovesick and she's trying to get Molly a boyfriend as well. This is not something Molly's ever had to deal with before, and it's not something her sister Cassie has ever pushed her into before, and she's worried on top of that because she feels that because she's fat that she's more likely to be rejected, and so she refuses to put herself out there. So I mentioned a few things in there, but let me just give you a rundown of the diversity in this book. Molly and her family are Jewish, as well as the fact that Molly has an anxiety condition which she takes medication for. Both of those aspects of her are own voices. She also deals with a lot of body issues throughout the novel. Her sister Cassie is a lesbian, and the girl that she ends up in a relation with is a pansexual Korean American girl. Fabulous. Cassie and Molly have 2 moms. Oh my god, I am so excited by the number of 2-mom families that I read this month. One of Molly's love interests is Jewish. There are multiple other background characters of color. It was really good as far as diversity goes. And beyond that, it was so fabulous. It was a lot about family relationships, especially Molly's relationship with Cassie. I have never read a book that I felt like I really could connect with as far as sister relationships goes, because I feel like I don't read that many books about sisters, but god did this book get it. In general, I loved so much about this book. It is definitely going to live up to all the hype. I personally think I liked it more than Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which is Becky Albertalli's first book, and this is a companion to Simon because Cassie and Molly are the cousins of Abby, a character in Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, and you get to hear a little bit about Abby and Simon and what's been going on over there since the book ended. So, no direct spoilers, like you don't really get to find out who Blue is in this book, so don't worry about that, but you do get to find out how some relationships change by the end of Simon as a warning. I wound up giving Upside 4 out of 5 stars. Guys, be ready. I'm going to be doing a full review soon, because it's great, and I cannot wait for other people to read it. So the next book I read was A Darker Shade of Magic, but I'm actually going to hold off on that for just a second, and first I'm going to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender, Smoke and Shadow. This is by a variety of people, but namely Gene Luen Yang, as well as the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is the 4th in the Avatar: The Last Airbender comic series, which I have been reading for a while now, and I adore. Can't really tell you what this is about, because not only does it take place after the show ends, but it takes place after a bunch of other comics in the series, but this one focused really heavily on Zuko, as have most of the comics. They've been very, very Zuko heavy, and it was really fabulous, of course. My one complaint about this one is that there have been characters absent for a few comics now. Katara, Sokka, and Toph really have been low on the appearance scale, which makes me sad. Toph had kind of a big one a while ago, but she wasn't in this, and Katara and Sokka weren't really in this, and that was really making me sad. So I'm hoping that in future comics they'll make a reappearance, but from a Zuko and Aang standpoint, from a development of the Fire Nation standpoint, fabulous. I gave it 4 stars, just like I've given the rest of the Avatar: The Last Airbender comics. Alright, so let's talk about two of my 5-star reads of the month, A Darker Shade of Magic and A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. So A Darker Shade of Magic is the first book in a fantasy trilogy. It takes place in this world where there are actually multiple worlds kind of layered on top of one another, and there is this one guy, Kel, who has the ability to travel between these different worlds. And the thing that connects them is that they each have a different London. Black London, Red London, White London, and Grey London. Each of these Londons has a different type of magic, except for Black London, which has been completely forgotten and has become the stuff of legend. This was my favorite book of last year. I adored it. Victoria Schwab has some of the most beautiful writing in the world. I just fall into it. I fall in love with it. This is even more tabbed than it was last time. Kel is a completely wonderful main character, as well as a character, Lila Bard. I don't love her quite as much as Kel, but she has really grown on me. There's a lot of adventure, traveling, magic. It's fabulous. A Gathering of Shadows is the second book in this series. Obviously, I can't tell you what it's about, but, okay, so a lot of people told me this was better than A Darker Shade of Magic, and here's where I both agree with that and disagree with that. For the first half of it, I was totally not in agreement. I did not think it was better than the first one. In fact, I thought it was super slow going and was not covering any of the stuff that I wanted to hear about. But once it gets into the last half and really gets going to the part of the plot I was excited about, that is when it got better than A Darker Shade of Magic. That's when it was doing stuff that was fascinating and interesting that I was hoping for. Also, this book finally introduced a character I have been dying to meet, and I was already ready to ship him with the person I knew I was going to ship him with, but then as soon as he showed up on the scene and they were sharing scenes, I was like, In both of these books, there is a side character slash semi-central character who's bisexual. He's not really present as much in A Darker Shade of Magic, but he takes a pretty starring role in A Gathering of Shadows. This ended, and I, panicked and immediately ordered the third book. I can't believe people had to wait a year to read A Conjuring of Light. I was a little frustrated with the development of Kel, but I thought Lila's development was super interesting, and Rye, my sweet Rye. It was fabulous. There was so much expanding of the world in this one. There were pirates and so much magic, and I cannot wait to find out what happens in the last book because it could honestly go anywhere, and I've heard it's gonna break me. So I gave both of these 5 stars. I can't wait to read the third one because this is one of my favorite series that I've ever read, and I'm hoping that the last book seals that. After that, I read a book called The Pants Project by Clarke. This was released at the beginning of March. It's out now in the world, and you can get it, and it is a middle grade book about a trans boy named Liv. So Liv is just entering middle school, and as he's about to start school, he finds out that this middle school has a very strict dress code, and at the school, Liv would be forced to wear a skirt. He's really displeased with that. He does not want to have to wear a skirt, and so he starts something called the Pants Project to attempt to change the dress code at their school and change the minds of a lot of people around him. This book was a little slow to start for me. I had kind of a hard time getting into the middle grade part of it. I don't read a lot of middle grade because I think that it can be really simplistic, which is not a problem because that's the age group it's written for, but I have a hard time reading it. But I think it really found its voice and hit its stride by the middle of the story. So this is the second book this month that featured moms. 2 moms. The mums. Liv had 2 mums. And what I love about these stories with the 2 mom families is that they get to be so supportive of their queer children, just so there for them, and it's such a nice change to have this family structure that's so open and supportive to however their children are growing up. It's just a joy. Because I'm a cis reviewer, I can't really comment on how realistic and accurate the portrayal of Liv was as a trans boy. I don't believe the author is trans. What I really liked about this book was how much it emphasized fighting and fighting to make your own voice heard. And I appreciated that narrative as something for middle schoolers, for middle graders who want to read this book, as a fight for your rights kind of thing. It's okay to fight the rules if they are being unfair to you and your identity, then fight and fight hard. I think sometimes it was a little bit weak in terms of narration. There is a side character that has a disability, but we don't get to hear a lot about that disability. I could have used understanding that a little bit more. So those were kind of my thoughts about the Pants Project. I wound up giving it 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I think it had a lot to offer, but those were my general feelings on this book. Next up, I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So I just did a full spoiler-free review of this book that I will link on the screen. You can go check it out. If you somehow haven't heard of this book yet, this book is about our main character, Star. She kind of lives 2 separate lives, one in her predominantly black neighborhood and one in her mostly white suburban prep school. And then these two worlds kind of collide when Star becomes the sole witness of the murder of her best friend Khalil by a police officer. This book was inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was just beautifully done. In so many ways. Star is such a fabulous main character, and she has such a distinctive voice. When people talk about distinctive voice in books in general, that's what Star was. She stood out off of a page. She felt like a real person. This book hits a lot of really serious notes and does it incredibly well. I don't know, it was funny, it was sharp, it was really heartbreaking at times. I cried multiple times reading this book. It did what it set out to do, and it did it incredibly well. I just feel like this is a book that's going to stick around. It said something, it said it well, it did it with characters that were well written and dynamic. It was a criticism of the world we live in and the things that divide us, and it was just fabulous. I wound up giving this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. For more of my spoiler-free thoughts, you can go and check out my review. The next book that I read was also an ebook, and that is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. So this is one of those books that I'm going to have a really hard time talking about because it hit me in such a specific way that I don't know how to articulate it. This book is about 19-year-old Juliet. She is this Puerto Rican girl who's grown up in the Bronx, and she gets to go and be an intern for the summer for the author of her favorite book. So she goes from the Bronx to Portland, and there she really falls into the queer scene, mostly like queer women scene, and she's really trying to find and articulate a place for herself within feminism because it feels really exclusionary to her. It doesn't feel like she has a place in feminism when so much of it is white and very, very white. And she's also trying to find a way to articulate her identity as a lesbian, how that fits into her relationship with feminism and her family, and it's just so good. This book was a really specific critique of white feminism, and it verges into sometimes being a critique of cis-sexist feminism, which I appreciated, but mainly this was a book about this fiery, nerdy, intelligent, funny Puerto Rican lesbian girl trying to find her place, and it was so well done, and it was a critique of so many things. I'm completely willing to admit that there were like moments in this book that didn't flow as well, that fell into like feminist rhetoric 101 or queer rhetoric 101, but I just didn't care. It felt like one of the most authentic portrayals of a lesbian girl that I had ever read, and this is an Own Voices book, and I think that showed. Obviously, I can't identify with Juliet's struggle to find a place for herself in feminism because I'm white. Feminism is designed to suit me, and that's the critique of the book, which I thought was done incredibly well. There are so many visibly queer spaces throughout this book. Almost no men are present, honestly, from beginning to end. It's very much about queer women and queer women interacting, whether that's predominantly queer women of color or queer women of color interacting with queer white women. There are exclusively queer spaces that they explore, along with this emphasis on the importance of POC-only spaces. I read the epilogue, which was not that upsetting an epilogue, and I sobbed because I just felt so moved by this book. Clearly I gave it 5 stars. I tried to articulate myself a little bit better in a written review if you want to go read that. That's linked in the description below, but this was a book that I want to recommend to so many people because I think it did so many things so well. And I loved it. And it's definitely going to be a favorite of the year. I just adored this book. So now we're getting into my second reread of the month, and that is Invasion of the Tearling by Erika Johansen. This is the second book in the Queen of the Tearling trilogy. It is a fantasy series. For some reason it's marketed as YA, but I would call it more adult than YA, honestly. It's a really, really political series, and Kelsey is one of my favorite female characters, and I'm rereading this because I'm jumping into Fate of the Tearling, which is the final book in the trilogy that I haven't read yet. There are a bunch of characters that get introduced in the second book that I was really unsure of at first, but that I really loved, and upon a second read, I loved from the beginning because I knew so much about them. The series is really great if you love that thing where this group of really unlikely people come together to become like a found family. The found family in this book is incredible, and the love they have for one another is great, and there's magic and politics, and this character who finds herself becoming really morally gray, and she doesn't know how she feels about that, and I love this book. This is one of those books that I think is better than the first book. I love Queen of the Tearling, but I think Invasion of the Tearling is even a little bit better. And of course, I gave this book 5 stars, just like I did the first time. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous book, and I'm terrified because I'm currently reading Fate of the Tearling, and I'm just so scared to find out how it ends. And the final book that I read in the month of March was Thanks a Lot, John LeClair by Johanna Parkhurst. This was sent to me by the publisher. It's this YA book about this guy, Emmett Lapointe, and he is supposed to be like the next big thing in hockey, but he's really terrified by that because he's also gay and he's dating his coach's nephew. And even though hockey talks a lot about being accepting, there are no openly gay members of the NHL, which makes Elliot feel really terrified to come out and to wonder if he can still be a hockey player and do what he loves and be gay. Okay, so like, I'll be honest with you, this was not well written. I like that this was part of the collection of things I've been reading recently that is sort of a criticism of the lack of queer voices in professional sports. And then I liked the presence of a couple of the other queer side characters. They were pretty small queer side characters, but there was a character in here who I believe was pansexual. I think one of my other problems with this book, besides the not well written bit, was that I feel like the character was a little too willing to forgive and forget. Not that I'm not advocating for forgiveness, but there were these characters and they would explain where they were coming from, and Emma would kind of be like, well, now that does make sense. And I accept that, except for in some instances, there's not just like this jump where you automatically forgive someone. Someone can be in the wrong, and you can continue to be angry at them while also understanding why they did what they did. And I feel like this book didn't allow Emmett to be angry once anyone explained where they were coming from. Like, some of them did really messed up stuff, and they didn't necessarily deserve automatic forgiveness. So I don't know. This definitely did not feel the check please hole in my heart. I've been looking for something that's gonna help me to feel that, like, happy gay hockey love story, but after I finished this, a little bit afterwards, Check Please updated, and I cried. So, in the end, I gave this book like 3 stars, maybe a 2.5 is more accurate. It was really only so-so. Okay guys, there you go. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of March. If you have read any of these books, please leave comments about those reading experiences down in the comments section. That's where you leave comments. I hope that you enjoyed watching my wrap-up and hearing my thoughts about all of these books. Make sure to check out my standalone reviews or my written reviews so you can hear more of my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Look for my TBR later today, and I will see you in another video, well, later today. Yeah. Bye!